It was a rainy Tuesday in New Orleans when Malik Jackson walked into Le Vieux Carré, one of the city's most exclusive French Creole restaurants. The scent of butter and seafood filled the air, mingling with the faint aroma of cigars from the nearby jazz lounge. Malik adjusted his worn leather satchel over his shoulder, carrying his resume and a notebook stuffed with recipes he'd perfected over years of hard work. His heart pounded with a mixture of hope and terror as he stepped through the ornate brass doors. Behind the reception desk, a tall, slim maître d' glanced up, his expression already souring when he spotted Malik's scuffed shoes and threadbare jacket. "Deliveries go around the back," the man said without even asking Malik's purpose. Malik opened his mouth to explain, but before he could, a cluster of chefs passing by in crisp white coats laughed openly. "Look at this guy," one muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "What's he thinking? This ain't no soup kitchen." Malik clenched his fists inside his pockets, feeling the sting of humiliation burn hotter than the Louisiana summer outside. "Why did I think they'd even consider me?" he thought bitterly. In that moment, the memory of his grandmother, Mama D, flashed into his mind. How she'd taught him to stir roux slowly, patiently, telling him, "Baby, good things take time, and they don't come easy." Her voice was a balm against the ache of rejection. He stumbled backward out of the restaurant, the laughter still ringing in his ears. Outside, the rain had turned to a heavy downpour, drenching him instantly. Passers-by hurried past, umbrellas bobbing like colorful jellyfish. Malik stood there, shivering and soaked, staring back at the golden letters on the restaurant window. It felt like the city itself had turned its back on him. Yet somewhere deep inside, buried beneath the shame, a stubborn ember began to glow. Back in his tiny apartment in Tremé, Malik sat cross-legged on the stained carpet, flipping through his worn notebook. The apartment smelled of old wood and spice, remnants of the countless experiments he'd conducted in his makeshift kitchen. His fingers brushed over the handwritten recipes: Mama D's gumbo, Grandpa Elroy's jambalaya, Auntie's red beans and rice. Each dish a piece of his family's legacy. "I ain't got their fancy kitchens," Malik muttered aloud to no one but the flickering light bulb overhead. "But I got their soul in my food." His words hung in the air, heavy with both pride and desperation. He remembered being a boy, standing on a milk crate at Mama D's side, stirring a pot as big as his chest. "One day," she'd said, ruffling his hair, "you gonna make the world remember our flavor, baby." The sound of a text message jolted him back to the present. It was from his best friend Andre, a sous chef at a neighborhood diner. "Forget them, man. You got fire. Come through tomorrow. We'll cook." Malik smiled weakly, grateful for the lifeline. Andre had always been his biggest supporter, someone who saw not just Malik's potential, but also his pain. As the rain battered the windows, Malik closed his notebook and whispered, "One day, they'll beg for my recipes." He wasn't sure if it was a prayer, a vow, or a desperate dream, but it gave him enough strength to get up, turn off the flickering light, and head to bed, already plotting a future that seemed as distant as the stars above. The next morning smelled of wet earth and strong coffee. Andre greeted Malik with a bear hug outside Miss Lottie's diner, a modest joint with faded blue paint and a cracked neon sign. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and bustling, the smell of frying bacon and syrupy pancakes enveloping Malik like a blanket. For the first time in days, he felt almost at home. In the cramped kitchen, Andre handed him a battered apron. "Let's show him," he said with a wink. Malik grinned, rolling up his sleeves. As he worked, slicing, seasoning, and plating with meticulous care, he remembered every lesson his family had ever taught him. Every chopped onion, every pinch of cayenne was a love letter to his roots. And as the customers began praising the dishes, a tiny shard of Malik's broken confidence pieced itself back together. "You know, we could do our own thing," Andre said later as they scrubbed the griddle. "Open a spot, something real, something ours." Malik laughed bitterly. "Man, you know how many banks gonna lend money to two broke black boys from Tremé?" Andre shrugged. "We don't need a bank. We need a dream. And you already got that." Walking home under the still dripping oak trees, Malik felt the weight of his future pressing down on him. Can I really do it? Can I really build something they can't laugh away? The question chased him through the dark, but for the first time, it didn't feel rhetorical. It felt like a challenge. Malik spent the next few weeks obsessively drafting a plan. He stayed up till dawn sketching menus, practicing dishes, and budgeting on scraps of paper. Every mistake and every setback became part of his secret weapon, preparation. His tiny kitchen smelled constantly of roasting peppers, simmering stock, and baking bread. His neighbors often knocked, asking for a taste, and their wide eyes and happy moans fed his hope. One night, Malik stared at a blank page labeled restaurant name. His mind flickered back to Mama D. D's table. Simple, honest, a place where everyone was family, where no one would be turned away or laughed at. Tears welled up in his eyes as he wrote the name in bold letters, underlining it 3 times. Andre helped too, bringing second-hand kitchen equipment and ideas from every place he'd worked. They even recruited Miss Lottie herself, the diner's owner, who agreed to teach them about the restaurant business in exchange for cooking lessons. "Ain't nobody gonna hand you nothing," she'd said, "but you boys got something can't nobody take, heart." And in the quiet hum of hope and hard work, a revolution began, one plate at a time. Finding a space was a battle of its own. Malik and Andre toured abandoned storefronts with cracked windows, kitchens lined with rust, and rats scattering into the shadows. The smell of mildew and lost dreams clung to these places like a second skin. But when they stumbled across the corner building on Dumaine Street, a battered brick structure with peeling green shutters, Malik knew. Despite the rot and ruin, he saw a home. Inside, the floors were warped, and the kitchen was a graveyard of broken stoves and frayed wiring. Andre coughed, waving away the dust. "Man, this place looks like it survived a hurricane and a fire." Malik chuckled grimly. "Then it's just like us. Broken, but still standing." The two exchanged a look, unspoken but loud. If we can fix this place, we can fix anything. Days turned into weeks as they worked, scrubbing walls, hauling trash, painting by flashlight when the power wouldn't cooperate. Their hands blistered, their backs ached. But every swing of the hammer carried something more potent than exhaustion, stubborn pride. Their neighbors, curious and skeptical, would stop by. Some offered help, others just shook their heads, whispering, "Poor boys chasing a pipe dream." And maybe it was a pipe dream. But sometimes dreams built from desperation and memory are the strongest kind, because they're too precious to let die. Once the bones of the restaurant were set, Malik turned his full attention to the menu. He didn't want to just sell food. He wanted to sell history. Each dish would be a story, a memory plated with intention. The kitchen filled with the scent of charred okra, caramelized onions, slow-roasted meats. The air itself thick with nostalgia and ambition. Late one evening, while testing a batch of shrimp étouffée, Malik stood over the stove, lost in thought. The sizzle and pop of the skillet seemed to whisper to him, "Remember where you come from." He stirred carefully, his mind drifting back to the stories Mama D used to tell, of how gumbo was born out of scraps and struggle, a dish that turned poverty into celebration. Andre leaned against the counter, biting into a fresh beignet. "You know," he said around a mouthful of powdered sugar, "this ain't just food. This is a rebellion, man. They think our flavors are too rough, too loud, but they just ain't ready for real." Malik laughed, but inside the words took root. "This is a rebellion," he repeated silently. "This is my revolution." The walls of Dee's table were still bare, the tables mismatched, but when Malik placed his dishes down, glossy, colorful, alive, the whole space seemed to bloom. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. And soon, it would be New Orleans too. Opening night arrived wrapped in humidity and tension. Malik stood at the kitchen pass, hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his chef's coat, borrowed, too big, the sleeves rolled up clumsily. Andre peeked through the cracked front door. "There's a line," he whispered, eyes wide. Malik's stomach flipped. A line. They hadn't dared to hope for that much. The restaurant buzzed with anticipation as the first customers filed in. Families from the neighborhood, curious foodies from across town, and a few skeptical critics with notebooks poised. The rickety ceiling fans hummed overhead, barely stirring the thick summer air. The scent of roasting spices and fresh bread wrapped around the guests like a welcoming hug. Malik called out the first orders, his voice growing steadier with each command. 2 gumbo, 1 fried catfish, 1 étouffée. Pans clattered, flames flared, and the kitchen danced to a rhythm as old as New Orleans itself. As the plates left the pass, Malik caught glimpses of diners' faces, eyes widening, heads nodding, smiles breaking out, and his heart swelled with fierce, overwhelming pride. They laughed at me. They said I didn't belong. But look at them now. They're tasting my story. They're swallowing every word I couldn't say. By the end of the night, Malik stood in the doorway, apron stained and hairline slick with sweat, watching customers linger over empty plates, savoring the memory of their meals. Strangers clapped him on the back, mothers hugged him, old men wiped their mouths and said, "This? This tastes like home." Malik fought to keep his composure, but tears blurred his vision. Andre burst out of the kitchen waving a smartphone. "Bruh, you won't believe this. Foodie Nola just posted. 4 stars, man. 4 freaking stars on opening night." The restaurant erupted into cheers. Even Miss Lottie, who had slipped in unnoticed, raised her glass of sweet tea and shouted, "Told y'all!" Heart always wins. What had started with laughter and rejection now simmered into something richer, something unstoppable. Dee's Table wasn't just a restaurant, it was a movement, and it was only the beginning. Months passed, and Dee's Table became the heartbeat of the neighborhood. Word traveled fast, first through whispered recommendations, then through blog posts, then through glossy magazines with Malik's name printed in bold. The restaurant filled night after night, the buzz as thick in the air as the scent of smoked paprika and sweet cornbread. Malik moved through his kitchen like a conductor, every chop and stir a note in a song only he could hear. But success brought new challenges. Investors came knocking, wanting to expand the brand, to polish the rough edges that gave Dee's Table its soul. Malik listened politely, but his heart recoiled at the thought. One evening after service, he sat with Andre in the empty dining room, the chairs upturned on tables. "They want to turn us into something we ain't," Malik said, voice low. Andre clapped him on the shoulder. "Then we just keep being who we are. Ain't nobody else got our flavor?" Malik often found himself staring out the window at the bustling street, reflecting on how far they had come. Success don't mean selling out. Success means honoring the ones who built you. He thought of Mama D, of her tired hands kneading dough, of her soft voice telling stories of resilience between stirring pots. He owed her, and everyone like her, something real. In a world that tried to polish, package, and profit off every ounce of Black creativity, Malik chose instead to root deeper, to become not a product, but a legacy. One Saturday afternoon, just before the dinner rush, Malik noticed a sharply dressed white man lingering by the hostess stand. His heart twisted when he recognized him. Chef Bernard Duval, head of Le Vieux Carré, the very man whose restaurant had laughed him out the door. Malik's body tensed instinctively, the memory flashing back sharp as a blade. Duval approached, adjusting his expensive cufflinks. "Chef Jackson," he said smoothly, "I've heard remarkable things." His tone was coated with condescension, the kind rich men often wore like aftershave. Malik crossed his arms, steadying himself. "Glad you finally heard what you missed," he replied, voice calm but firm. There was an awkward silence. Duval cleared his throat. "We're looking for fresh talent. Perhaps you'd consider consulting for us. Bring some of this magic to Le Vieux Carré." Malik nearly laughed out loud. Funny how they only open doors once you've built your own house. He leaned in slightly, dropping his voice so that only Duval could hear. "You laughed at me once. You'll forgive me if I laugh now." With a polite smile, Malik turned on his heel, walking back toward his kitchen, where his real family waited. 2 years after opening, Dee's Table received an invitation that seemed almost too surreal to believe. The Michelin inspectors were coming. Malik paced the tiny office above the kitchen for days beforehand, nerves eating at him. "Michelin don't come to neighborhoods like Tremé," he kept thinking. "They don't see us unless we force them to." But Andre slapped him on the back and said, "They ain't got no choice now, brother. We too bright to ignore." The day of the inspection, Malik cooked like his soul was on the line. Every dish that left his past carried generations of history. The gumbo thick as memory, the fried okra light as laughter, the bread pudding heavy with caramel dreams. The dining room glowed with candlelight. The jazz band played low and sweet, and the spirit of Mama D seemed to dance in every corner. Weeks later, the letter arrived. Malik opened it with shaking hands in the middle of the kitchen, surrounded by his staff. "One Michelin star," he read aloud, voice cracking with emotion. Cheers erupted. Some cooks hugged each other. Others just cried openly. Malik stood still for a moment, letting the truth sink in. Dee's table wasn't just a neighborhood secret anymore. It was history. Against every sneer, every slammed door, every whispered, "not good enough," Malik Jackson rose. Not by changing who he was, but by digging deeper into who he had always been. Years later, Dee's table remained not just a restaurant, but a pilgrimage site, a place where people came to taste more than food. They came to taste resilience, heritage, pride. Malik mentored young chefs from the neighborhood, teaching them the way Mama D had taught him, patiently, lovingly, fiercely. The walls of the restaurant, once bare, now held photographs. Malik's grandparents smiling over steaming pots, Andre with flour-dusted hands, the first full house on opening night. On quiet afternoons, Malik would sit at a corner table, sipping coffee, watching the kitchen hum with life. New chefs ran the pass now, but every dish still carried his soul. Sometimes he thought he could still hear Mama D's laughter echoing through the hallways, light and proud. They laughed once. Now they listen, and they'll keep listening long after I'm gone. Malik smiled, tapping a rhythm against his coffee cup, a beat as old as his bloodline, as steady as the city itself. Because dreams born from fire, carved from rejection, and seasoned with love are the ones that never die. They only grow stronger with every soul they feed.